Welcome back to the Gin's Treasure. Today I am going to go over how to make a wire wrapped ring. And to do that, we are going to choose this bead here, which I believe is a citrine. I'm not 100% sure. I did go to like a local crafting store. I'm not talking about like a Michael's or something, but like, yeah, a hole in the wall crafting store that has like all these cool fabrics and stuff. And so I got this whole bag of natural gemstones for just $1. Thank you, the legacy. So unfortunately, because it's a mixed bag, I don't know exactly what kind of stone this is, but given the color, I would guess maybe like an amber or a citrine. Hope it's citrine. For our wire today, we're gonna do the zebra wire. This is a 20 gauge, and this is silver coated copper wire. Now, for the 20 gauge wire, what I do is like one full spool around. And so I'm gonna do that twice because I actually need two 20 gauge wires. So that's why I spun it around twice. And then there's this little hole here that I'm gonna thread that through. And then, so this is all the wire that I'm ready to clip. So I'll clip that, set that over there. And then now this, like I said, I need to turn this into 2 wires. And my way of doing that is to kiss the tips like so, zip all the way down till we get to this loop right here. Clip that, and now we have 2 evenly lengthed 20 gauge wires. And then that's the frame wire. Now what I'm gonna do here is coil or wrap those frame wires with this, I believe this is actually 26 gauge wire. I'm gonna pull, what I do is about an arm's length, so stretching my arm all the way out to the side and then pulling on the string. I'm just gonna turn the camera around to better explain what it is I'm doing here. Oh. Now I'm messing up my tripod. All right, so if you can see me here in my cool background, Chanel number 5. That's a really cool, some cool graffiti art, by the way, if you could see that. So if you could see, imagine yourself like pulling an arrow on a bow, like a bow and arrow. You see how I'm positioned like this? And then, so instead of an arrow, I'm pulling on the wire. And so this is the length, about the length that I use for the, for that coiling wire. And then, so I'll tuck the rest of the wire back up on the spool, put that spool away. Now we can flip back. Readjust our tripod. So that's how we're gonna be working with 3 wires, right? 2 20 gauge wires and then 1 skinny gauge wire, probably 26. My standard, or traditionally I'll use 24 gauge, but it doesn't matter. What's important is that it's a skinnier, higher numbered gauge wire. So you can see there's clearly a thick wire, and then I just folded the 26 gauge, so that's why it looks like there's 2 of those. Not to confuse you with the 2 20 gauge wires. So better yet, it would look like 2 20 gauge wires and then 1 skinny 26 gauge wire. And then what I did with that 26 gauge wire, it was the same thing where I kissed the tips, boom, and zip tie all the way down to find that loop at the bottom. And then with that loop, what I'm gonna do is take my 20 gauge wires and thread those through the loop. All right, sorry for taking it off camera. Nothing happened though. Nothing happened off camera, don't you worry. All right, so what I do is I put that when I thread the two 20 gauge wires through, I have the loop stop right about middle. It doesn't have to be perfect, just somewhere about the middle. And then from here, what I'll do is begin coiling my wire, my coil wire, which is the 26 gauge wire. I'm going to coil that around my frame wires, which are the two 20 gauge wires. So one thing that I would like to put into good practice for this specific video, I know in the past I've not done a good job of watching my work through the lens of the camera. Instead, just kind of watching with my eyes off camera, and then just trying to position it in camera. But that's not helpful for you guys, so I'm gonna try to make a point of making sure that, you know, I don't get like blurry or out of focus or go off screen. I'm gonna be watching the screen as I work, so that way I'll be seeing what you guys are seeing. So once I get a few coils here, just enough for me to take my, oh, by the way, these are my flats, my flat pliers. I have some flats, I have some fingers, and I have some clips. Obviously the clips are what I use to clip the wire off the spool and to make any necessary cuts later, you know, clipping off the excess wires. But for now, I'm gonna use the flats. So what I do is I take the flats and pinch down on the coiled portion, and that gives me a much more sturdy grip working with the pliers. So the plier fingers are doing kind of the clamping, as opposed to my you know, round and soft fingers, which would ultimately potentially give me blisters if I was working. Let me show you what I mean. If I were to be working like with just my fingers pinching down, this is kind of, it tears on the skin. Actually, it creates a little bit of friction as you coil. These wires are pulling against my skin, so it doesn't feel good. I prefer to use the pliers. They feel better for one thing, and I find it to be a sturdier grip. So with the pliers pinched down, I continue to coil. And the idea of the coiling these two wires together is that this is actually going to be the band that wraps around the finger, is what I'm building here with this framework. So I'll actually be coiling for quite a minute here. Oh, also too, after that initial pinch down, it's always good to kind of pinch down along the way. And that way you're maintaining the flatness and the parallel of these two wires. What I'm saying is, like, so if you imagine my fingers here are the wires, it's important that they stay flat and parallel with each other as opposed to crossing over each other. You want to avoid that, and it's something that kind of naturally wants to happen as you coil the wire, because the way the wire is wrapping, it's kind of like spinning the wires, so they naturally want to twist around each other. That's another advantage with the flat pliers, is that the sharp angles and the flatness of the pliers are way better than like my rounded fingers for keeping a good flat grip and control. So another thing too, if you'll notice, so let me give you an example of what's not looking good. So if you look closely here, you'll notice that there's these gaps, right? How do you solve those gaps? Well, you just pinch down at the base of where you're coiling and push up, and it closes those together. So once they're closed, then you can kind of pinch, and then clamp down right at the base of the coil, and then continue coiling forward. At some point too, actually right now would actually be a good time, what I'll do is flip the wire around, because we want to make sure that if we're eating the length of this wire, but with the coils, that means that this wire is going to be shorter than this wire, and we want to maintain an even balance with those. So what we do, that's why I flipped the wires around. So now I'm going to begin coiling on the opposite end. If you imagine this was like where we started in the middle, I coiled outwards that way. Now I'm gonna be coiling outwards this way, just to keep that even balance. And then every so often, just release the grip. I'm going pretty fast. I know that's because this is kind of like a repetitive step, and not a lot of instruction once you get the flow of things going, but I will slow it down right now for you. So this is my technique for coiling. I use my finger as a guide, while my middle finger and thumb, and really these fingers down here, they're pulling on the wire to give it some tension, and then my pointer finger is like the guide to make sure that my coils are tucked in nice and neat, just like how they are there. It's that's the objective. It's not like imperative, or it's not like mandatory that you have to have perfect coils, but as you practice and go along and make more rings and produce more rings, you're gonna want your work to not look so shoddy, and that's why it's important to have nice and tight coils. I don't go on Instagram anymore, but I did go on today and just kind of walk down memory lane, and I looked at like my old gallery of the wire wraps when I first started. It's cute what I thought was a good wrap back then. But also it was kind of nice because I was looking at it and I was realizing like that whole learning process, that was the necessary step for me to learn and kind of fumble through the wire works to figure out what is actually a good style and what is my style. And I do actually, because of the way that I kind of invented my own style, it's not often that I see other wire wrapped work that looks similar, which is cool. You know, I have like my own signature style. Any artist can appreciate something like that. Yeah. So from here, oh, I forgot to grab my tools. So for rings, I recommend these 2 additional tools if you're gonna be wire wrapping rings. I can't imagine doing it without them. It's pretty challenging. So this is they're both ring sizers, but they're of different ways. So like this, for example, is this keychain here. These are all different rings or loops, and they're all numbered. So for example, this is a 12.5. That dash indicates it's a half size, and then you have the 12 there. So then this would be 13, 12.5. The next one will be, you guessed it, 12. So you find with this keychain of ring holes, you find whatever size fits your finger. So say this is a 8.5. Boom, fits on my finger, that's my size. So then I know if I were to put it on this, boom, 8.5, right between the red 8 and the 9. There we go. So that's what we're gonna aim for when we're building the frame or the band that goes around the finger. That's what we use that rod tool for, is to measure how far along are we. Do we need to keep on wrapping more, which it looks like we do. My goal is to get the wrapped portion or the coiled portion wrapped all the way around until I meet where the numbers are, where this threshold is. So I'll stop on this side, and then the same thing on that side. I'll keep coiling until I get to right there, and that's where I'll stop and start the next step. So I got to keep coiling a little bit more, and what I'll do is I'll pull just to measure to see where these strands are, so I can see that this one, the far right one, is longer than the left one. So I know I can use more wire work to wrap and eat up that length going along the right side to maintain the balance and symmetry. But they're pretty close, so I'll get away with continuing to coil up on both sides still. I'll just be coiling more so on the right side than the left side. Another thing too, which let me show you. So this was a mistake that I caught myself doing. That's why if you saw what I was doing there, I was like reversing instead of just going forward. So this can occasionally happen. You get a little kink in the chain. What happened there was I was wrapping too fat. So the only way to fix that is to unwind it. If you find that happens to you. Now that I've unwound it, I'll explain how that happened. I'm coiling the wire outwards this way, but if I go too fast, the wire can sometimes slip up and go reverse and wrap back on the coiled portion and then correct itself and continue to coil forward. So again, knowing that I intentionally made that mistake, you can see how I did it and what that looks like. And the only way to fix it is to go reverse. All the way back to that flawed section, or before that flawed section, and then do it the right way, moving forward. So right there too, you saw how I stopped and then reversed. That was because I saw it was coiling backwards. And this is why it's good to go slow, especially if this is like your first time. So I think that's good on that side. Now I'm gonna switch back over and then coil up on this side. And by the way, if you try to, your measure like, okay, how far along are we? And then you got to keep going. So you take this out. You're more than welcome to unbend this and flatten it out if you find that it's getting away. There's no reason to make yourself work harder. All right. So that's looking pretty good. I'm gonna test the measurement one more time. But before I do that, I'll notice this. You see how it's kind of, the wires are not getting twisted around each other, but the wire, how to explain it with my fingers? It's like they're both kind of like getting twisted. So it's not an even strand, if that makes sense. Not even, but it's not as straight. So you just gotta kind of press into it and make sure that it is more flat and not twisted. Then we'll place our ring sizer back in there. We're going for that 8.5. Look at that, we're looking good. It's almost there. We still got a little bit more, but we're almost there. So then once again, we don't need to keep this bent. We'll flatten that out. Coil a little bit more, just a little bit more, a little bit more. Shout out to Bradley, R.I.P. Bradley. He was the lead singer for a ska band in LA back in the 90s, Sublime, if you've heard of them. And that was a little bit more. That was from one of my favorite songs. I mean, really, I love all the Sublime songs. But Saw Red is a good one, even if it is kind of a tragic song worth singing about. Anyways, we're here wire wrapping. We're not doing Sublime today. So we got a few more coiled. It looks good, and I'm gonna trust that that's good enough. The next step, we're gonna do this, it's all about symmetry with the ring. So everything we do to one side, we will have to reverse and do to the other side. So this next step, what we're doing is, I call it splitting the V, or splitting the hairs into a V. So you see the V shape, or you could also think of it as a Y if you want to include the wrapped portion here. You see a capital Y. Anyways, what we're gonna do is take our coiling wire and start to do, instead of coiling around both wires, we're actually gonna jump in between, and we're gonna start to do like a figure 8 pattern. So we go in the middle, around the outside, and then come back, and then go through the middle, around the outside, come back. And I do it so that you start to see, let me do one more and then you'll start to see the pattern. So that was 3 total. And if you look closely, you can see there's the pattern. So 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3 on each side. And then from there, I generally coil three times. Doesn't have to be 3, but just 3 times, or however many times you choose, on just one side. So we keep this one naked and this one gets a few wraps on it. Now what we're gonna do is same step, other side. And it's important too, sometimes these wires, as I mentioned, they'll get like twisted or bent, and you wanna make sure that you're following along a flat, and that all this is flat as opposed to being twisted. Because otherwise you're gonna try to put your ring on and it's gonna be all twisted and mangled, and you'll never wear it. So again, we split the V's, split the hairs, figure 8s, 1 on one side, 1 on the other side. There's 2 and 2. One last time, 3 and 3, and then we finish on this side, coiling 1, 2, and 3. All right, and then so from here, this is what I call the drawbridge, because to me it looks like a draw. Sorry for that interruption. I actually I forgot to delete the old videos on my phone, so the storage space got full. Actually, I had to delete in the deleted files, because even though you delete your photos and videos, they still save on the deleted file. So you have to delete that. Then you have the free storage space. Anyway, so that's what happened. Now we're back. You didn't miss anything. So here we are, we're at the drawbridge. And I call it the drawbridge because to me, I picture like a body of water right here, and then here's one end of the bridge, here's the other end of the bridge, and the drawbridge goes down. From the aerial perspective, you'll see it'll look like a diamond-shaped window, right? And then for me, what's important is that we keep it symmetrical. So for example, if on the top side, this side is underneath this wire as it is, so you can see this one is underneath that wire, then this one would have to be on top of this one, if that makes sense. So with that in mind, and then we also, oh no, what did I do? So the mistake that I made, it's solvable. But the thing is that both of these wires, this wire should actually be on this side if this one is on this side. So that's how we keep the symmetry. It would be adjacent. So from the top left corner pocket, we have the wire. So the bottom right would be the opposite or adjacent. And that's where this wire should have finished. So quick fix. We undo that, undo those coils. And then we just continue along with the figure 8 to bring it over to the other side. And we do 1, 2, and 3 coils. Now we can do the drawbridge, close that, and there we go. Now we have our symmetry. All right, now we're gonna get our bead involved, our amber citrine yellow bead. The way we do that is with our coiling wire, our skinny 26 gauge wire. We're gonna thread through the bead hole with one end, and then with the other 26 gauge wire, we're gonna thread through the opposite end. So it'll look like this, with 2 end wires coming out each side. Then we can kind of pull that tight. And the idea is that this bead rests right on top of that diamond window, kind of like a rectangle if you look at it like that, but at the angle, it's kind of like diamondish. So the bead rests right on top of there. And then this wire is gonna it comes outside of the bead and then around both of these wires, and then it actually gets tucked underneath and then pulled through. So now if I do that one more time, or a few more times, you'll start to see the pattern. So you keep threading that through, and what it's doing is tying these two wires together. Now we're gonna do the same thing, keeping it symmetrical with the other side. So our 26 gauge wire, we're gonna take it and thread it through that little window there from the underneath and pull tight. So now this wire has just tied these two together. So we'll thread that through one more time, and then, and then we will start to see the pattern or the trend. So this coil, you can see how, let me grab my finger pliers. So this wire was coming up, and then it coiled here, and now it's reattaching these two wires, and it's continuing coming from this direction along, and it's gonna keep going along that way. We are pretty close to the finish, and usually about at this point is where I start to play around with some stylish finishes. That's the thing, is that as you play and you know, make mistakes or try new things, that's the fun part of art and creation. You discover new ways of doing things, new styles. But in general, this is all like the basic standard way of creating these rings, these style of rings. And I really enjoy it because, like I said, you get options as you get towards the finish. You get options for ways to style out your own finish and come up with like your own unique signature. So now, just as I said, let me show you one more time. This wire was coming up, and then it coiled on just that one wire you see, and then it reattached this wire and this wire all through this coiled portion here, tying those two together. And then we're almost to the finish line here, so just a few more coils linking this wire and that wire. And then we'll switch it and flip it around to the other side. Keep going on the same thing. So you can see coming around from this direction, and then we keep coiling and wrapping these two wires together. So that's what we'll do. Then we're gonna end up having a lot of like excess wire, which is not a bad thing. In fact, when I teach classes in person, I always tell my students the #1 rule of wire wrapping is to overestimate the amount of wire that you use. It's always better to have excess clipping wire, scrap wire, as opposed to not having enough wire and not even being able to finish the wrap. That's the biggest tragedy, the biggest crime against wire wrapping, not having enough wire. So yep, we're just continuing to come around, thread through this little middle window here, comes out on top, and pull that through. Let me see if I could kind of get the camera lens in there, so if you're not sure exactly what I'm doing with all that. Okay, so we're aiming for the wire's gonna come around and then go through that window right there, and then it comes out up top, and then it just keeps coiling around and around and around, tying this wire to that frame wire. So I hope that made sense if it wasn't making sense before. All right. And then this is about it. I know it looks silly, but just wait till I put the rod through it, and it will, this finger band is gonna look more like a real ring should, instead of a awkward mango shape. Okay, so then with all this excess wire, we can just clip that off. And now when I clip off the excess wire, for me, I have a habit of intentionally leaving a little pokey tip right there. And I choose to do that because if I can, if I intentionally leave those pokey tips, I feel like I have more control or more say over how those pokey tips will end up. So what we do with that pokey tip is just curl it around. And then these are the flat pliers, by the way. So we are gonna curl that around. There's the pokey tip. And keep wrapping it so that the very, very tip of it gets tucked away underneath. That's the intention behind intentionally leaving a pokey tip, is that you have more control over where that very tip ends, and you want to have that tucked in as opposed to poking out, because nobody likes pokey jewelry. So here's another pokey tip, and that's poking out on the top. Done intentionally. Now I take my flats and just bend it around. There we go. Now we have the frame wires to play around with, and I think what I want to do is, if you look closely, you'll notice that. Well, here, let me pull the back wires out of the way so we don't get those confused. So right now, if we look at this wire and this wire, we can see that they fold over each other in such a way that this one is the bottom wire and this one is the top wire. So you can really see that right there. We'll emphasize that. This is the top wire up here coming out, and then underneath this bottom wire comes out. So what I'm gonna do is same thing with the bottom wire, is clip, leaving a pokey tip, and then take that pokey tip. This time I'm using my finger pliers, my rounded finger pliers, pinching down, tip of the pliers to the tip of the wire, and then I'm curling like a little hook, and I'm tucking that underneath there. So let's see, there you go. You can see where that hook is, that little hook wire, and I just tucked it in. So it's underneath everything. And we're gonna do the same thing with the other side. So this is the top wire, and we're gonna clip the bottom wire, keeping a little pokey tip, and then we go tip of the pliers to the tip of the wire, pinching down and curling that hook so that it's tucked underneath. And it almost looks like they were part of the same wire and they just broke off in there, but they're not. And then with these top wires, we're just gonna do a little dance, a little spin around the stone. You could do that a few times. You could do it one time. You could do it no times at all and just do the same thing where with the bottom wires, where you just clip a pokey tip and then curl that hook and tuck it underneath. But I wanted to do a little style finish, and what I'm gonna do is, I've got these wraps around, and that's the style finish that I was going for. So that's complete now, so I'll clip off that excess. And so this pokey tip right here, I'm thinking is just gonna get tucked in right in that hole right there. So let's shoot for that. Tip of the pliers to the tip of the wire, and Oh, does that help? Oh my goodness, I can't believe I forgot the light. So it's really important that the pokey tip does not, that it gets hooked and it's tucked in on something. So right now, what are you doing? Why are you not focusing? So that pokey tip is right there, but it's not, it's still hanging out. So we really want to tuck that in. What I'm gonna do is take my flats and kind of help smash that hook so that it ends up getting caught on something and it gets tucked away. So you see how it's tucked in there now? Now I have just that one last pokey tip. And for this one, I'm gonna tuck it between the wire and the bead. Right there. Do you see where the wires come out of the bead hole? Oh my God, that focus is ridiculous. Maybe the light's not helping. So you see where that bead hole is and the skinnier wires are coming out? My intention is to take this pokey tip and curl it to hook around where those little wires come out, and hopefully it gets caught. Now I take my flat pliers to kind of smash it or tuck it in. And then go ahead and just do any like massages or just to test and make sure everything's tucked in nice and neat. Now, last step, sliding the ring on, and look at that, 8.5. Boom. Here's what it looks like in the jewelry box. Voila. Thank you.